Hi, my name is Calixto Chichilla. I'm the founder and executive director of the New York Latino Film Festival.
And my name is Eric K. Thomas, and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of the Quintessential Gentleman.
And we're proud to partner with the Quintessential Gentleman and American Airlines on this year's Futuro Digital Conference.
We're bringing you 3 impactful panels that are going to help you to be a better content creator. These industry experts are going to give you the information you need. Right, Calixto?
That's right, Eric. And this year, we're proud to present an amazing set of sessions from the top multicultural creatives. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Futuro.
It's funny. As we start to go places again, maybe we'll find the places we want to go aren't really places at all. They're people. That's why we've been hard at work, making sure you feel confident every step until you get to them. So when you're ready, our people can't wait to take you to yours. You are why we fly.
Welcome to the New York Latino Film Festival 2021 Futuro Digital Conference. I'm Gabriela Fresquez, host, writer, and producer at Radar 2021 for NBC Universal Telemundo. As social media evolves, so are the ways that activists are raising awareness to the issues that our communities face. From police brutality to having our voting rights threatened, now more than ever, it's important to have those who dedicate their platforms to informing the masses. Welcome to our social activism panel, and here are our panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Warrick. I am the co-founder and CEO of Elevate app. Elevate is an inspirational living and holistic wellness application that serves as a personal guide to mental, physical, and emotional success. We provide peer-to-peer relationships and connections between our users and therapists within the application, and also use predictive analytics to provide a more personalized wellness experience.
What's going on, guys? Dontrelle Inman here, 8-year veteran in the NFL, CFO of Milano Consulting, CEO, founder of Inman Enterprise, just an entrepreneur, just trying to make a buck. That's it.
Hello, hello, hello. My name is Major Nesby. I'm the creator of Neon, which is a digital platform through the GLAD platform that highlights queer Black narratives.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Gabriela Fresquez. I am the host, writer, and producer at Radar 2021. It's a show for the Latinx, Millennial, and Gen Z audience for Telemundo, NBC Universal. So I'm really excited to be here. Welcome to the social activism panel. So I've read quite a bit about you all, and obviously one thing you all have in common is using your platform for social activism. So to kick things off, I just want to ask a really basic question, which is, why is it so important for you, for each of you, to use your platform to spread awareness for your various causes? Major, do you want to start? Put you on the spot.
Sure, I'll go. So for me, I've always been a creative. I started my professional career as a professional dancer. And I was lucky to be a member of AILE 2, which is the second company to the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. So dancing in this institution that really spreads American culture across the globe, it just really inspired me. So Mr. Ailey's legacy always was a beacon of inspiration for change and really representing nuanced audiences, right? So from there, when I started working in media, I was just kind of like, okay, where do I see the gaps? Where can I build bridges, right? Because, you know, sometimes we have to look and say, okay, if you're, it's not enough to just talk about the problem, but how can I contribute to a solution? So that's just how it all came about in terms of creating Neon with GLAAD. So I just saw a void and I wanted to see more queer Black representation, and here we are.
And Aaron, what about you?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to utilize your platform to spread awareness. In regards to mental health and wellness overall, it's very important. Mental health does not discriminate, right? It impacts all of us, regardless of creed, culture, background, walk of life. It impacts all of us. Economic status, it does not matter. So talking about it pushes the needle forward. It breaks down barriers, and it kind of breaks down stigmas associated with mental wellness and mental health. I always believe if you're like in some type of position to do good for other people, it's your moral obligation to do so. So that what really drove us and my team to kind of find, put together Elevate and have this platform to provide these services for people. In addition to that, you know, it's always great to have representation for people that look like myself, right? There's not too many Black-owned companies or CEOs that really are getting funded and really pushing the needle forward with platforms and organizations like ourselves out there. So it's great to have representation in that regard as well.
What's up, guys? So I think for me, I'm an athlete, right? So all athletes have like instant gratification. And it's important because anything we do, we have a microscope on us. Anything we do, you know, we have kids mimicking us. So, you know, I grew up in South Carolina where, you know, racism still exists when you walk down the street, when you go to the grocery store. So my goal was to never go back once I left. And thinking about the 10 years that I've been gone playing professionally and also going off to college, when I made that commitment not to go back, I realized I was, you know, hurting my community. And for me, if I post something, if I say, hey, this should be changed, 9 times out of 10 as an athlete, you know, millions of people hear that thought or hear that change. So for me, it's very important because if 1 out of 10 athletes try and make a change, it affects our community so much.
And Dontrelle, I would also ask you, for you, what came first? Was it your desire to, like, did you have a connection to these causes that you now support today? Or when you felt that microscope, you know, being under that microscope because of your athletic career, was that the impetus for you to engage in social activism? So basically, which one came first?
I think it was actually just when I stopped ignoring the problem, you know, like most people do. I think I ignored the problem for so long. I knew it exists. I knew it, you know, I grew up in it. You know, I wanted to change it, but I didn't know how to change it. So once I saw other athletes trying to change it, once I saw the world trying to change it, I said, I have to help. And so that was the breaking point for me. And I think that was about 3 or 4 years ago. I just helped change, you know, a bill. There's a police reform bill, HB 670 in Maryland, that just really just changed the whole concept of police reform. And they now have to be, you know, governed now. And so that's what really changed it for me.
And I really appreciate you talking about how you came from South Carolina, because I feel like those personal connections to the causes that drive you are really what inspire your audience, right? So Major, what personal connection, or can you tell us a little bit more about your personal connection to the causes that you champion, and kind of what drives you on a personal level?
Absolutely. I think growing up, I think that there was a lot of things projected onto me in terms of queerness, right? You know, you get teased, you get bullied and things like that. And as I got older, I just really wanted to understand my personal identity. And therefore I was like, wow, so I'm sure that other queer people feel similar, right? So Neon in particular is very, very personal because I just wanted to really give a platform to people to show that there is diversity within this community. It's not, you don't have to be just one thing. You can dance along the spectrum. And so I guess that's just really where it came from. It was just this, I really, 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 really wanted people who don't necessarily live in major cities or live in countries where they don't have access to see other queer people, to really give them a vehicle to see themselves, and also to kind of be like, you know, it's okay to be who you are. And it's a journey, right? Identity is a journey. I feel like, you know, from the time we're born to the time we transition, that it's a journey in understanding who we are. And I just really, really wanted to create work that reflected that journey. And also, just like I said, give more queer Black people a space to see themselves uninterrupted without the projections of perhaps other people who may not understand the identity, right?
And I think it's such a great time for that. I mean, we're seeing so many people generate really amazing content. And I feel like some of the greatest content out there right now is from creatives who are kind of, you know, behind the camera, obviously, as much as they're putting people in front of the camera. And I think that's where the real change comes from, when you have storytellers that are living that experience, and we're able to see those stories from the perspectives of people who actually experience them. What a concept. Aaron, what about for you? I mean, you created this entire app, this business around self-care, mental wellness. Obviously, we all have our own mental health journeys, but what were some of the personal experiences that impacted your drive to create Elevate?
Absolutely. So that's a very great question. Growing up in Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, there wasn't too many specific role models that I can look up to. There was many bad influences for myself. I knew I didn't want to be a part of that status quo. I didn't want to fall into the stigma. I didn't want to be what everyone thought I should be. So I wanted to lay out my own platform, my own lane, and say, hey, you know, I want to take life and grab it and say, I can do this and I can make life my own thing, however I want it to be. With that being said, mental health was an issue that my family has personally experienced, myself as well. So it wasn't foreign to me. So when we developed this application, we said, hey, let's do something that impacts all of us. And we sat down and thought about all the things, and we're like, mental health is something that we all dealt with. My co-founders and myself in college, we were graduating and we were like, hey, we get into the real world, we're going to get a nice job, make some money, and you graduate college, and a lot of those things did not happen, right? You know, sometimes people got fired, or people may have relationship issues, or, you know, just things go wrong. And during that time, we would lean on each other. And we would provide inspirational messages. We would share therapists. We will, you know, just call and say, hey, how you feeling? And I think that what really drove the idea of Elevate.
Wow. Well, it's great to hear you came from such a supportive community, because I feel like some people are at such a loss with where to go and who to turn to. And the idea of therapy seems, for a lot of people, just out of reach, inaccessible, expensive. I started therapy last year personally, and it's been such an incredible experience, but it was only because I suddenly had an insurance that would provide for it. So why not? So each of you use your online platform specifically to promote these various causes that you speak for and you represent on a level. What are some of the benefits of having that online platform, online presence, specifically in terms of how you use social media? Because a lot of us have this love-hate relationship, right? And speaking of mental health, it can affect you in a lot of ways. It can be this really positive influence, and it's almost kind of how you build it, right? Who are you following? Because a lot of times we get on there and we play the comparison game, and we're looking at all of these perceptions of people's, you know, all the different ways that people want to be perceived. That's not necessarily authentic or true. So long story short, tell us some of the positive components of how you use social media to amplify your causes.
I guess I'll go first. For me, I'm a huge and firm believer in financial literacy. I think that also goes hand in hand with mental health, and how, you know, people of color have derived and came up within, like, I guess, the past 150 years to try and be equal to the other races that have been, in control for thousands of years. So it's hard because the Black community, the Latino community, they grow up just knowing, hey, every dollar that I make, I gotta spend. The Black community is taught to gamble where, other communities are taught to invest. So for me, I use my platform to let folks know that, hey, there's things out there, and you coming from a bad situation, you still can learn how to invest your money. It was so funny that everything that I teach my kids is, I'm not going to give it to you. You have to earn it. You got to know what to do with it. My son, short story, said, hey, Daddy, what are you doing talking about this water company that I invested in? And I said, Daddy always said that when he has a signing bonus, he invested somewhere, because, when I was your age, I never heard about an investment. He said, okay, that's cool. He said, well, one day, Daddy, I want to invest in Nike. How do I buy Nike stock? And I think that little small nugget that I gave my son, if I can give it to every follower that I have, that will bounce around to my community, and other athletes can do the same, and other people that can do the same. The impressions on that is, you can't put words on that. So that's how I use my platform. And then also, it's a double-edged sword. When you start talking about things in the world, some people will tell me as an athlete, just shut up and play ball. Like the LeBron factor, just shut up and dribble. And we're human too. And we didn't grow up in this world just to play basketball. That's a talent that God gave us, right? But he also gave us many other talents to influence and to help and to change the world. So that's how I use my platform.
And social media is such an incredible tool for education. And I think just choosing to follow the right people is always key to what your experience is going to be on there. Truly, because I follow a lot of financial literacy experts, and it's a great daily reminder, especially when we're spending so much time on our phones. You may as well learn something in the process. And from somebody like yourself, who is a respected athlete, who's somebody who's clearly successful, disciplined, and also has so much more to share. So I think education is definitely one of the most important ways we can use social media. Aaron or Major, what do you think some of the benefits are of getting to use your online platforms?
I think for me, one of the benefits is when I come in contact with the community in which I'm trying to help, right? I have the privilege of traveling a lot, and just randomly, I've had people say, hey, I really like the piece you did on such and such. And to me, that's just such a huge, it's a warming feeling, because, a lot of times you never meet the people in which you're trying to affect or help. And once again, I'm one person. My team, we're just a team, right? These are our perspectives on certain conversations. And when it resonates with other people, that's the reason why I do what I do, really, because I just really want to connect communities. I want us to see ourselves. I want this movement of visibility, right? And so when people appreciate it, just in passing, it just is overwhelmingly an amazing feeling.
I think that connection is definitely critical to everything you do. I mean, I think it's probably that unique factor that social media has, right? When we were growing up, the best way we could contact our favorite celebrity was writing a letter or
right.
Sending to a fan club. But today we have direct access to the people that inspire and that influence us. And I want to ask you a follow-up question, which is, how do you feel about connecting with your followers through the DMs? Because recently I heard from a really well-respected journalist that because I always used to think that was such a no-no, that you shouldn't, you should keep everything out in front where everyone can see it. But I've been hearing different things from people who have large followings, that connecting through those personal messages is actually a way to make basically a lifelong follower out of someone, because they feel so connected to you and so seen. So how do you feel about that?
I think one thing that I'm continually working on is boundaries, right? I think that everyone has to think about, realistically, what boundaries work for me, right? So I'm not someone that posts a lot. I usually post, I post randomly, or I post my work, right? And it depends. Like if someone is, I feel like if it's good intentions in the DMs, then I will engage. But if I don't, then it's like, girl, bye. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I think that it's really, really important for everyone to determine what their boundaries are. And I think that that's just a way to kind of exist within this virtual reality that we all participate in. Because as long as you're clear on what you will allow or how much you want to engage, I think it makes the social media interaction that much more enjoyable.
And Aaron, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to hop in on that. So I think there's a time and place for everything. In regards to DM specifically, I think you just have to be intentional about how you are approaching them and what are you approaching them about. With me, if you DM me and there's potential opportunity or see a collaboration, I might say, hey, this is a great idea. Let's move towards email, right? So I just think you have to be intentional about how you communicate with people and the method you take. I did want to pivot slightly and talk a little bit about the pros of social media, because that's one, right? The ability to connect to people all over the world. You can reach and touch people that's across nations and across borders. I have a gentleman who had used the application and downloaded it, and it was in South Africa, and he wrote me and my team was just like, gave us a lot of great praise and how much he appreciated and impacted his life. And those connections cannot be made sometimes without these digital platform that we live in the world today. But like you said, it is a double-edged sword. So
online activism is interesting because a lot of times people will use it as sort of, for lack of a better word, like there's this thing called slacktivism, right? A lot of people will put a rainbow filter on, and the idea being that, yes, they're promoting a cause or a purpose, but without any real additional action to back it up. And obviously you guys are the real deal. You practice what you preach, and you have causes that you're really engaged with and in. So how do you combat any judgment or questioning of the work that you do? Like, do you ever feel that your authenticity online is questioned, and how do you respond to that?
For me, it's important that I choose and pick what I put out there. Normally what I put out there is all factual. So in a matter of someone calling me non-authentic, I could just pull up the receipts and say, hey, here's this article I mentioned here. Here's this video. It's public. You go to YouTube, you can see me speaking on it. So for me, in social justice, I try to pick and choose what I post, what I put out there, just so folks know that, he's really authentic. There's nothing fake about what he's doing, so everything that I do and say has a backing behind it, and it's factual. So that's how I eliminate that factor.
And Major or Aaron, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I think, what a great question. I'm sitting here thinking about it. I think we're living in this time with what they call cancel culture, right? And it's like everyone is like, oh no, someone made a mistake and things like that. But I think of it as a little bit different in the sense of not calling out, but calling in. So I feel like when people question authenticity of a person or figure or whatever, I don't see a lot of like interpersonal conversations on why they feel that way. For me and what I do, a lot of it is rooted in experience. So I don't really get as much of like, oh, this isn't authentic, because it's other people's experiences. Like I'm a storyteller, and one topic can be a plethora of people's experiences within that theme, right? But I will say that when I think about when people call out, I think that I would like to see a little bit more of conversation on why people feel that way and how we can come to a middle ground in understanding. So for example, if I'm doing a piece that has a historical component, I welcome, things that I did not know or my team didn't catch or things like that. But I feel like it's really about your intention, right? Like if you're calling someone out, for negative reasons, meaning like you're not coming with pure intentions. I think that that's kind of the thing that us as a society has to work on, because that's the part that is like, I don't know, like let's just have a conversation, whether it be if you choose to do it publicly or privately, let's have a conversation rather than the the back and forth that we see quite often on social media.
I want to follow up on that. Major, you mentioned a valid point. I always say to people, like, I guess you can't expect to live a purposeful life and not expect like rocks to be thrown at you. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but it doesn't make it truth, right? And people are going to have things to say, whether if you're doing good or doing bad. So you might as well do it anyway. And 9 times out of 10, the people that are having these comments and things to say are like yelling from the bleachers. They're not even in the field actually doing the work, right? So usually in those moments when someone may present that type of idea, that's a perfect opportunity to have a healthy conversation, right? Okay, this is how you feel. Let's come together and figure out how can you bring your opinions or your ideas to push this cause forward. Rather than kind of coming with a problem, let's figure out how we can have a solution together. Because I think nowadays everyone just coming with the problem. This is wrong. He did that. Blah 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 blah. But okay, what's the solution? What's the next steps? And that's what a lot of people do not have. So I think if it's nothing wrong to hold people accountable, but if you're going to do that, at least have some solutions to what we can do moving forward, right? So that's just like my whole stance on that.
Exactly.
No, I love that. And I also love, Major, what you mentioned about instead of calling out, calling in. I think that's just a great sort of guiding light to all of this, because cancel culture is the result of this pendulum that's swung really hard in one direction, where people are getting called out, and we're living in an environment and in a time when things are being addressed that just had gone unaddressed for so long. So on the one hand, a lot of that backlash and that anger is incredibly justified. But now we're seeing such volatility online as a reaction, and really not a lot of substantive conversation. And I think people like yourselves who are leaders in this area are a great example of how to sort of navigate those attitudes in a way that is much more productive. And I think it's in a way it is a bit of a burden, but there is no other answer other than to sometimes, it is important to engage, and you kind of have to pick and choose.
Right. Because I also feel like even within myself, I'm human. And I notice when I'm the most critical of other things is when I need to check in with myself, and I need to love myself more. And I need to be like, hey, where's this coming from? Like, because for me, it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And if you're having a malicious intent and engage in the engagement that you have with someone, that's the perfect opportunity for me to be like, whoa, what's not going on? When's the last time I loved myself? When's the last time I spent time with myself? When's the last time I, did the things that I need to do to be a decent human being, right? Because we're human. We have bad days, we have good days. So I noticed even for me, and this is something that I learned through therapy, is like when I'm the most judgmental is when I'm not okay emotionally, mentally. So I think that it's always a song and dance that we all have to consider when engaging with other people, right? And everyone has an opinion, everyone, right? But I feel like if more of us ask ourselves, where's this opinion coming from? Is it based in my own stuff that I need to work through? Or is it a valid opinion that can move the needle forward? You know what I mean? And I think that these are questions that we all have to consider as much as possible while we're trying to get the bag, while we're trying to work, while we're trying to create, be adulting, right? But in the midst of all that, we really have to kind of try. And, luckily I have a support system. We hold each other accountable, but it's through love, right? It's kind of like, hey friend, checking in. Seem a little bit on edge, like what's going on? And I noticed that when I'm the most critical, it's usually when I'm the most critical of myself. So that's the perfect opportunity when I check in with myself.
100%, I can relate to that. I grew up with a very critical father, and I always feel that the minute I get on my high horse and I start judging someone else, it all goes back to me and what's going on inside here. And I'm like, oh gosh, oof, not that again. But yeah,
Right.
it's really interesting. And it takes it takes learning how to just stop yourself for a minute instead of responding, and really just checking in, like you said, because even if it's not that you're criticizing something that's a problem in yourself, because that's definitely a thing too, at least for me, but also that there's just something happening. There's some reason that that particular comment or that particular person is triggering something so volatile within you. And I think that's such an important thing to be able to learn, to check in with yourself like that.
Because we all have trauma. We all have trauma. For you, you said your father. For me, I come from a dance background. Anyone who's ever trained classically knows that it's Judgment City. Like, oh, I didn't do this right. I didn't do that. So for me, it's like those moments where it's like, no, love yourself more in those moments.
Right. Oof, dance background. I cannot even imagine.
Ciao.
So obviously you guys aren't people who think about or who shy away from certain topics or causes, whether it's political or social issues that you are invested in and that you care about. But what are your thoughts on people who do have tremendous amounts of influence, who shy away from speaking on certain things for fear of losing partnerships or losing opportunities or for being judged? What do you think about that? And maybe Dontrelle, will start with you.
This is a great question, because my occupation is it's full of, you know, we can go back to the conversation of guaranteed contracts in the NFL, right? The NBA doesn't have guaranteed contracts. The NBA free agents just took a stand of not going to practice because we're not getting paid enough, right? Every single free agent didn't go to practice, they didn't go to games, right? And for the issue of the NFL is people who are high paid individuals, they're high paid, you know, they don't care. And when that comes about, it's just like, okay, how can we come together in my profession in the NFL? It will never happen. And that's the issue that I have a huge issue with, because those who just don't care about it and continue to live their lives, why have that platform? You know, why not change when you have the ability to just say one word and, you know, everyone follows you as if you're a God, you know? So it rubs me the wrong way so much. And I look at people differently when they do that. You know, I kind of push them out of my circle, and try and help them. And if they don't want to help me help other people, then why should I have them in my circle? You know?
I'd like to add to that. That's a very great question. My thoughts on that, I believe, if from the beginning, if you always align with companies, organizations, or partnerships that follow and align with your moral compass, I don't think you would have an issue down the line with that, right? I understand you may be fresh into your career, or you're trying to build a life for yourself and your family, so you may take on these specific things and not do anything to jeopardize your brand or your partnerships or your business opportunities, and that's understandable. But in some way, you have to hold yourself accountable and say, I have a voice, I have a platform. What am I going to do with this, right? And even look back and reflect on the things that may have impacted your life, and the resources you may have utilized, and say, how can I turn back around and give a lending hand, or how can I speak up for people who don't have a voice? So I just believe just align with organizations and partnerships that are in line with your moral compass. I don't think you would have an issue down the line, because if it doesn't feel right with you, don't do the business. All money isn't good money, and all business isn't great business. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Oh, okay. I'll go. I think there's several thoughts going on in my mind, right? I feel like as a cisgendered man, I think that I was socialized to take up a lot of space. And one thing that I learned from a lot of women in my life was to sit back and listen. So therefore, I feel that in order to be a great leader, you have to know how to follow. And so I say that all to say, to answer your question, is that I think that once again, there has to be this song and dance, like, yes, take up space, yes, talk about things, but also use your platform to highlight people who do the work. You know what I mean? Because I can't sit here and say that someone should, because they may not have the language to talk about this. They may not have the experience to talk about it, right? Even with like Black identity, there's nuances to it. So if you have never had this specific Black experience before, then maybe I should bring along other people that have had that experience to talk about that experience, right? So I think that once again, it's a song and dance, is what to consider in terms of, do I have the range? Do I have the vocabulary to talk about this? Because when you're super visible, you affect people. And what you say could affect communities on a very visceral and personal way. So I feel like, once again, like, I don't necessarily think that just because you have this platform, you should do something. But what I do think is, if you do have a super large platform, and if you don't feel comfortable, because there's a comfort level, right, too. If you don't feel comfortable, then maybe bring other people along for the ride that do feel comfortable and endorse their work and work in partnership with them. So when I look at super visible people, athletes, celebrities, etc., I don't necessarily think that just because they have a huge platform that they should take up every cause that other people might, because they may not feel comfortable. But I think if you do, like I said, if you do have a large platform, then maybe employ other people to come along that ride that makes it so personal to you.
I think that's a really incredible point, and that's something that I personally grapple with as well when I'm working on a show that's supposed to speak to the diversity of a Latinx audience. Well, no one person can ever speak for it, nor should we even try, right? But at the same time, we want to talk about all types of issues. We want to introduce all types of topics on our show. And I feel like, obviously, in addition to doing the research and doing the work and educating yourself, something where I found is incredibly useful to invest a lot of my time in is finding the voices, finding those people and bringing them in and giving them that space. And that's something that I've been able to exercise a lot more. And it's a really exciting thing to be able to do. And it's so enriching for your audience. It's enriching for you to be able to learn and share and grow with other people. And so I think that's a really important point. Like you said, like, not everybody can speak for every cause necessarily, but you have a platform where you can invite people in again.
And let's normalize that. Let's normalize, like, oh, I'm not the person for this, but I do know the person for this, right? It's like you just said, no one person knows every experience. It's just impossible. You're one person. But I definitely, I think that's a way to alleviate that pressure too for people who are super visible. It's just like, okay, let me bring a team together. Let me invest in the work that you're doing, right? Investing in private creatives, right? So I don't know, that's just my take on things.
My other thought about all of this is just that we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation 30, 40 years ago, because I feel like it was just with our generation that there has been a major shift in terms of pursuing careers with some kind of social purpose, right? And like in 2019, there was this poll that they surveyed a number of millennials who the majority of which said that when choosing a job or when choosing a career, the social responsibility of the corporation was an incredibly important factor in whether they would decide to go with a said employer. And I feel like that's something specific to our generation that has shifted. And it's not something that would have been even considered a criteria of where to work or where to invest your time, which I think is a good thing. It's a good that we're looking at all of those things, because we're going to continue to carry that forward into future generations. And we're always going to be looking for that opportunity to speak on a cause, that opportunity to invest in a greater purpose than just our bottom lines, which is important, but it's always nice to have the added motivation of helping a cause. So we kind of touched on this a bit, but how do you respond, or how do you tune out the negative comments when people don't necessarily agree with one of your stances? Like, what advice would you give to other social influencers when confronting just straight up negativity, or somebody who is just maybe just challenging you? Maybe they have a valid argument. How do you approach those situations?
I guess I know I usually go first, so I go. I'll go ahead and go. It's one of those things. I piggyback off what Major said. It's everyone they're entitled to their opinion. I think Aaron said this as well. You're entitled to your opinion. I respect it. You may not agree with what I say, but I feel like you approach it with love. You approach that response with love, because that's what we're here for. Regardless if someone doesn't love you, if you approach them with love, that may change their mindset, their perspective, and they may start thinking like you. Like, hold on, I just called this person, a complete douchebag or asshole, and he just loved on me. So it's like, whoa, am I supposed to say this now? So I think approaching those responses with love, even if it's a thank you, I appreciate your response, and that's it. That goes a long way, instead of approaching it with a negative answer, or like, all right, now we're about to go at each other's necks. That's not the approach that you really want. And ignoring someone isn't the approach either. Because if you ignore someone, they may still feel like they have a valid point. You didn't change their mindset by ignoring them. So that's my take on it.
Well, we need more of Dontrelle on the internet, because I think it takes a lot of security in yourself to take that approach. I think that's a sign of somebody who is confident in their beliefs and their values, that you can take a moment and give that back to somebody, because it is such an amazing way to disarm someone with their negativity and the vitriol that they might come in with. I had an incident recently where somebody approached me in my DMs with something that was incredibly negative, and was like felt a bit of a personal attack, like in terms of what I do. And my first instinct was, well, okay, obviously ignore this person. Why would I engage with that kind of negativity? But I responded with love and totally disarmed them, and they couldn't continue with the vitriol. It just stops people in their tracks. I think that's great advice.
I'll go next. So in the past, I have to be honest, I would ignore it. I typically didn't look at comments or reviews, because I won't go down a rabbit hole and just be looking at stuff. And that's not good for your health, right? So what I typically do is, if someone does have something negative to say, you say, hey, I take it into consideration. Let's have a discussion about it. How can we improve this or make changes to which you have a problem with? Let's have a healthy discussion. Let's share your opinions with mine, or let's agree to disagree. But in the end, we had a healthy discussion, and it doesn't need to lead to backlash or any type of aggressive communication. I think also the people who mean well will always support you, and they will go out of their way to let you know that they support you as well. So I'm getting better at just following up and being inclusive of people who disagree, taking their thoughts into consideration, because sometimes there's truth into these things people may say, and it's an opportunity when you're feeling discomfort to say, how can I grow from this? How can we grow from this? Is it true? Is there anything that I internally need to work on? And kind of have that conversation. I think is the best way to do that. It's tough because there's so many people and there's so many comments, and you can't attack everything, but just do what you can.
It's a journey. It's a journey. I think it's a continual journey for me, because as someone who grew up on 90s hip hop, I feel like my first instinct is to be like rah rah rah. But like it was mentioned by my fellow panelists, that's not the best way to go about things. And I do think that we should approach more responses with love, and also consider like Aaron said, is there truth in this critique? But I also think sometimes we have to evaluate, is this about me or is it about the person that approached me? Right? And not to, hold yourself accountable, absolutely, right? But a lot of times when we're super reactive to other people, it's more about what we're dealing with internally than actually that person. That person could represent a negative experience from our past. That person could represent frustration of systemic racism. I mean, the list goes on, right? So I think that once again, it's a constant conversation with yourself. And I definitely do agree with my my fellow panelists that, like, once you approach it with love, like for what I do, for example, I'm always like, hey, if you have more historical information about this topic, please send me your resources. I would like to learn more. Like, oh, I didn't know that, or send me the resources. 9 times out of 10, they don't. But I welcome the opportunity to learn and, consider other people's realities, because this may be super whimsical, but I feel like there's multiple realities happening at one time. So your reality may contrast mine. And so for us to go back and forth, I just feel like, okay, let me approach this conversation by understanding rather than reacting, which, I think a lot of us, our first instinct is to be like, well, and it's like, okay, let me try to understand where you're coming from rather than attack or counterattack, because we're going to get nowhere. So, just approach it with love as much as you can. Once again, we're human, so you might catch us on a bad day, but I mean, that's real. Like, you know what I mean? You may catch you a bad day, or I may catch you on a bad day, but it's not about what you do, it's why you do it. So as long as you're coming from a genuine place, a place of love, I welcome it. Just give me your resources. Let me learn.
I love that. And yes, 9 times out of 10, they don't follow up with those resources, unfortunately, but it's good to ask. Another way of stopping people dead in their tracks. I think that's great advice. So as social activists, you confront all types of issues that, that are not so pleasant in nature, whether it's racial injustice, police brutality, homophobia in our communities. How do you keep yourself mentally sound and well when it is kind of your job to be talking and giving a platform to discussions about some of the uglier aspects of our world right now? How do you maintain that balance as you constantly consume this type of news? I'm asking for myself because I would like some advice as somebody who works in news.
I'll start that one. So that's a great question. We have to realize that approximately 77% of Americans have like social media of some type: Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So they're always consuming information. And people who utilize social media are 2.7 more times likely to be depressed, have anxiety, or they have sleep issues as well. And this could be due to the things that they're seeing and the images that they're seeing online. Typically myself, what I tend to do is once in a while, I will disengage from social media. I will probably delete my Instagram, not the account, just the application, my Twitter account or Facebook, and just leave it off for a month. And it just gives me time to kind of focus on healthy distractions, what I like to call it. So I love to snowboard. So I'm like snowboarding on weekends. We have indoor snowboarding. So I know it's summertime, but even in the winter, I'll go snowboarding. That helps a lot. I go to the gym, spend time with friends and family who mean well, and just make time for the things that I love. It makes me feel more like myself and focus on self-care. So I think sometimes it's disengaging from where it works. And when you feel better, you have to do the work and you get back into it. So that's how I usually combat that.
And I think exercise can be such an incredible form of therapy. I know it is for me, especially. I feel like with people who are very active, busy lifestyles, ambitious, for me, it's such incredible therapy to just go do some like extreme activity for a while. But you also mentioned spending time around other supportive people. And I read recently that one of the most significant factors that determines longevity of life had nothing to do with, or had less to do with physical health. And the number one factor was having close relationships. Close relationships were the strongest determining factor towards living a longer life, which I thought was fascinating. And it just speaks to the importance of maintaining that. And Major, oh, did you want to? Okay.
Yeah, for me, I know this probably sounds very privileged and I recognize my privilege, but for me, it's taking a trip. I think that was one of the hardest parts about when COVID started, right? Because I couldn't go anywhere. But for me, I'm a person that frequents these social media platforms. So I've tried the deleting of the apps, but then I always get the itch to go back on. For me, what I tried to do is I tried to change my algorithm. So like some of my friends, they look at puppy videos or like kitten videos, like to kind of change their like algorithm. And that's what I kind of do. So I started following more therapists who would post positive memes, and they would talk about things that really enriched my life. So for me, I just kind of changed my algorithm instead of looking at things that made me feel bad about myself. So just changing the algorithm for me, spending a lot of time with my day ones, the people that have known me the longest, the ones that love on me, even when I'm like, ooh, do I deserve this? But, you know, just spending time with them. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Changing my algorithm and spending time with people that love me and I love them.
Major, you made a good point. I want to mention that the algorithm part, I've done that too, and that works. Like I've unfollowed anything that doesn't align with what I don't want to see, and more of what I like to see, and that's more positive and beneficial to, you know, what I, you know, just what I want to consume, and it works. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, it changed so much for me. Like I was like, oh wow, I'm less depressed, or I have less, you know what I mean? Because I'm like, just change the algorithm. I don't know. Like I said, most of my friends, they'll do like puppy videos, or for me, it was just the memes. And also, I would like to add, taking a trip backwards in time when things were simpler. Like for me, I'll throw on a 90s R&B playlist and I'll be like, yeah, I remember the skating ring. I won't say what year, but I remember when life was more simple. And so those things too, watching an old show, watching an old movie where life was more simple, those are all tools that I use to kind of just like zen out and just remind me of happier times.
Yeah, and Aaron and Major, you guys said it best. For me, I do all those things. And one thing that I started doing, which was crazy, I was on a flight, and older gentleman, he may have been 80 years old. And what he was doing the whole flight, it was a flight from Atlanta to LA, is he looked at pictures the whole time. So he literally had this huge tablet and was just looking at pictures. I think his timeline went back to like 2001. And he just clicked on the picture, he analyzed it, he went through his head, the memories, what went on in that picture, went to the next picture. He did this for hours. And I asked him, I was like, hey, why were you looking at all those pictures for so long? And none of those pictures were of him. It was all of his circle. So he said, like, this is how I reset. You know, I travel, I never get to see my kids. I never get to spend as much time as I want to with the people that I love. So I always ask them, hey, always send me a picture of what you're doing, so I can always internally reset my mind and get away from the world of what I do every day. And he called that unplugging. He's like, that's how I unplug from the world. That's how I unplug from social media, is just reliving those, you know, moments through pictures and videos. And I just thought that was interesting. And I actually started doing it. And my spouse is like, hey, what made you go back to that picture that, you know? And I said, hey, it just was a reset for me. I needed a reset. So I went to my phone to look at some, you know, happy times, some happy moments that really changed my life in different stages, you know, of my life. And it really, really helps me, you know, going week to week, just say, all right, it's time for you to reset. Go grab those pictures, go see what you need to see to, you know, refresh your memory. And another thing is a schedule. For me, a schedule is very imperative to, you know, resetting, finding time, because, you know, you really only have 8 or 9 hours a day to fit everything you want to do. And, you know, the more things that you tackle, the less that time you get to use for yourself. And, you know, you'll look around and it's Sunday, like, dang, I didn't even treat myself, you know, to a nice meal or anything. I've been doing everything for everyone else. So the schedule is perfect, for me, because, my schedule is the same every single day from 6 o'clock all the way up until, when I go to bed. And those moments of when I need to debrief and get away from the world or, reset, I know it's going to happen because it's in my schedule.
Dontrelle, I'm going to steal that. Looking at pictures, I like that a lot. And I didn't realize that I unintentionally do that. Like the other day, I was looking at a bunch of old pictures and I was sending friends, but it made me feel good. So I'm gonna steal that. I like that.
Yeah.
There's something really moving about imagining this guy on a plane going through old family photos. I found that really touching. It was really beautiful. And yeah, it's something I do unconsciously as well.
Right.
I'm
like Major said, she goes on trips. Aaron says he unplugs, he deletes his app. He literally was doing all that in one. He's looking at trips. I saw pictures of, his kids on boats. I saw him in the mountains. I saw him at home. I saw his dog. Like and he didn't mind me sitting there just like, I know he's looking, but I'm still gonna go through, my routine. It was kind of neat.
I love that. Well, I think we have time for one last question. So my final question for you all is, what role does vulnerability play in how you present online? Because we've talked about how online activism is such a great way to connect, to educate, but how do you communicate vulnerability with your audience, and why do you think that that's important, if at all?
Oh, vulnerability. That's tough. That's an ongoing thing I'm continually working on, because we know that the more people know about you, the more it potentially can hurt you, right? And that's real. That's real. But I think like I said, there's several versions of what vulnerability looks like and what it could be. So if you're creating a piece about something that is personal to you, that could be vulnerable, even though you're not directly saying it. So I think that also there's so many different ways to be vulnerable. One thing personally in my life, I'm trying to incorporate me being more verbally honest with how I feel about things with my loved ones. And I've noticed that that is affecting my work in terms of like being more vulnerable and things like that, because sometimes we're like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that, because it brings us back to a place that may not be as pleasant. But at the same time, it is life and life is happening. So like I said, for me, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that, because it's a continual journey for me. And I think socialization too plays a part of it. Like, I was socializing little boys in comparison to little girls, as a guy, like, you're taught to just be quiet and just endure, and like you're supposed to be tough, you're not supposed to have emotions, you're not supposed to have all these feelings, and that doesn't really give you the room to be vulnerable or learn vulnerability. So it's definitely a newer phenomenon for me that I'm continually trying to see what feels good to me, what feels authentic to me, so I'm still working on my relationship with vulnerability. That's all I got to say.
But we all are, right? And I think that's extremely relatable, because as professional people, as people who put yourself out there, and not only put yourself out there on a professional level, but you're also talking about issues that are incredibly important, issues that touch a nerve. That in itself is a vulnerable thing to do. I mean, you all do it all of the time. And so to say that you're still navigating that, I mean, that's real, that's vulnerable. I think we all are all the time trying to decide, am I saying too much? Am I doing too much? Am I revealing too much? Am I revealing enough? And that at the end of the day, those revelations, that willingness to share and connect is what draws people in. So
I think also it's another conversation you have to have with yourself, because it's like, what feels authentic to you? Like, we all have this inner dialogue with ourselves, and we know we have these feelings on how we should navigate and how we should go about things, but sometimes we don't listen to that inner voice, right? So, some people seem super vulnerable, and that's their version of vulnerability, but if someone is not there yet or may never get there, I think that their version of vulnerability is still valid. So once again, multiple realities happening at the same time. And it's like, yeah, like I said, it's an ongoing, it's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah, I guess I'll step in and kind of say my spiel on how I've been affected, and I've kind of conquered vulnerability in a way of, going through therapy, which everyone needs therapy. I always tell, if it's my sister, my mother, a coworker, hey, try therapy. It works. And one thing I got out of therapy, which helped me with vulnerability, is my therapist, we used to go through this stage of radical acceptance, right? So radical acceptance is you already know what the outcome is. So if you already know what the outcome of whatever you're doing, you automatically set yourself in a place to know and respond of what you know is going to happen. Let's just say, okay, I know I'm going to be vulnerable if I put this out there, but I also know what the outcome is going to be when I put this out there. So I already know how to respond to the outcome, which puts you in another mental state to accept whatever anyone gives you. So that has helped me so much with just dealing with, is this going to hurt me if I do this? If I say this, am I going to lose my job? Like, what's going to happen? And honestly, I already know what the outcome is. And if I know what the outcome is, how much can it hurt me? So that's my take on it.
Dontrelle and Major mentioned some great points. Major briefly mentioned that, we have to have this idea that we need to be tough, right? So there's this thing called toxic masculinity where we have to soldier on, we have to be rough and tough, we have to have this hard exterior and maintain this perfect image, right? But maintaining that perfect image, who does that really help? Because that doesn't help anyone else. I think there's strength and vulnerability. Telling your story may also impact someone else, and they may be able to take the steps necessary to handle the situations that they may be dealing with, so on and so forth. And also allows you to express yourself and kind of relieve and let go of all of that internal stress and things that you have weighing on you. So I think that there is strength and vulnerability, and it's just identifying what does that look like and using that to your advantage.
Yeah, I would also like to add that it's a skill set, like vulnerability, communication. These are all skills. And one thing that I'm working on is that I don't get to pick and choose when I use the skill set. If I want people to communicate with me, if I want people to be vulnerable with me, this is something that I have to continually work at. And you know what I mean? Because once again, trying to hold myself accountable, right? It's like, well, you didn't tell me that, or da-da-da-da-da. And then I have to be like, well, Major, are you always communicating? Are you being vulnerable with the people in your life? Do your closest friends really know you? Like all these things, right? So yeah, I think it's a tough thing, especially as we all engage in this digital world. It's just really, really hard because also that a lot of people don't have your best interests at heart. So it's like, how do you balance, being vulnerable, but then also people using what they know about you against you. And that's extremely hurtful. I don't know how everybody else feels, but that's hurtful. Like the one time I'm being vulnerable and then you come at me with, oh yeah, remember? And you're like, oh, whoa.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I think also when we're requesting people to be honest, it's in music a lot. Be real, be your authentic self. But what if your authentic self isn't welcome? Then what do you do? So it's like all these conversations about vulnerability. It's like, okay, but are you ready for my vulnerability? Because you may not have the skill set to deal with my vulnerability. And that's real, right? Like, it's just kind of like, so I think that it's a conversation that is outward, but it's also an internal conversation as well. Because it's like, if I'm requesting this person to be more communicative or honest, I also have to be honest And I also have to communicate. And I don't know if everybody else feels this way, but I know when I feel slighted, my first line of defense is to withdraw. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. But is that really helping? So it's like, I think that we all have to have the conversation. The things that we request from other people, we also have to, as much as we can, right? We have to also offer the people in our lives.
It's a fine line. You know, vulnerability can empower some, but it can also, you know, empower people who have malicious intent against you. So you just have to, you know, I guess, play the cards you dealt with and wish for the best. You know, you're doing it for a greater cause. So, you know, if that's gratifying enough.
And Dontrelle, I know you mentioned practicing radical acceptance, but I think when it comes to vulnerability, we can also practice radical self-acceptance and
Absolutely.
just learn to embrace those outcomes before they come a little bit more, which is difficult to do. And that's why vulnerability is a challenge and it's a constant journey.
Yeah.
But that's something I've tried to employ lately, is just that radical self-acceptance, which feels so unnatural at first. But
yeah,
it is, yeah.
It's tough. It's tough because we're taught to really embrace the positive things about us, but we also have to look at the negative things too, and the areas in which we need to work on. It's like, I'm this, but I'm also this, right? And you know, do I want to change that? Do I not? Like, it's always an internal dialogue.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time, for your generosity, and for really giving our audience an opportunity to know who you are, to gain some insight from all of your experience, and just in general for the work that you do, for choosing to use your platforms to advance these very important causes. That in and of itself is an accomplishment. And I just want to say how much I appreciate each of you.
No, thank you so much for having me. You know, anytime. Like, these are conversations that, you know, we should be having, you know, more than just on a panel. And I hope that, you know, whoever's watching this panel, you know, they share it and then they have their own conversations about the same, you know, ideas and topics.
Thank you very much. This was a great honor. Great panelists. I'm excited to be here, so I would love to do it again. So please consider me if you have any other speaking engagements. You know, I think we're pushing the needle forward having conversations like this.
Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to have this conversation with everyone involved. And I look forward to more conversations like this in the future. Thank you.